Good afternoon and welcome to the Boise Metro Chamber's Metro Minute series, your quick guide to business impact. My name is Tori Thomas, Community and Government Affairs Manager here at the Chamber, and your host for today's event. The Boise Metro Chamber is Idaho's only five-star accredited chamber, representing nearly 2,000 members. Our events and educational content are possible thanks to our members' investment into their community. Before introducing our speaker today, I'd like to thank Hawley Troxell for their generous support. Please enjoy this brief message from our sponsor.
I'm Tom Mortel, co-managing partner of Hawley Troxell. Our firm is proud to be the sponsor of the Boise Metro Chamber's Metro Minute. In the 6 communities we serve throughout Idaho and eastern Washington, we have the pleasure of providing legal services to great companies, large and small. Similar to the Chamber, we represent companies from Main Street businesses to some of the largest corporations in our area. We appreciate the opportunity to advocate on their behalf as a part of the Chamber's advocacy program and to further the Chamber's efforts to advocate on behalf of its members. Welcome to the Metro Minute. Please enjoy today's presentation.
Joining us today is Senate Minority Leader, Senator Melissa Wintrow.
Hello.
Hi, thanks so much for being here.
Oh, it is so good to be here. And I love to see that little dog on your wall. It's so cute.
Bella gets to make an appearance. She wishes she could come to work every single day. So I figured she should have a place on the wall. And then she can at least feel like she's a part of some things. She's not a big fan of staying at home all day, but she goes on quite a few walks during the day, so she's good.
Well, had I known my wide angle on the camera would have been this way, I would have actually hung up my coat.
Hey, it's chilly out. You need a coat.
Shut the drawer on my office desk, but my body is hiding the mound of papers.
Oh my gosh. No, it's been, I'm sure, constant for you this time of year. It's so busy. You guys have so much going on, and we're grateful that you're able to be here with us today, and we appreciate the time that you've spent at the legislature and also just with your constituents and with the chamber chatting with us today. So well, I wanted to give a little quick bio for our listeners to learn a little bit more about you, and then we can jump into a few questions.
Great.
Senate Minority Leader, Senator Melissa Wintrow of District 19, has spent over 30 years in higher education, providing leadership to students, faculty, and staff. She has held key roles in women's leadership programs, founded SAGA Strategic Solutions, and serves on the advisory board for the National Institute of Civil Discourse. A Henry Toll Fellow and Ironman finisher, she brings a deep commitment to leadership, civility, and public service. Senator Wintrow serves on the Finance, Health and Welfare, Judiciary and Rules Committees, as well as the Joint Appropriation and Finance Committee, otherwise known as JFAC. So thank you so much again for your service and for joining us today.
Oh, it is such a pleasure to be here. And actually, it's a nice break in all the chaos to shut my door and actually be with you.
Good. Well, I'm happy to provide that for you. Well, let's jump into a few questions and go from there. So speaking of JFAC, you are a member this year. Can you give us an update on the budget and the other big items that are being worked through right now?
Well, yes, the Joint Finance and Appropriations Committee is a committee comprised of 10 members of the House and the Senate, and this is where state agencies come and deliver their budget requests for all the programs and services that people value and care about and need in our communities. And we've gotten through all the presentations and most of the motions, and we're just left with the really big ticket items. And as I look at my cheat sheet, I don't even really need it, but we're looking at colleges and universities. We haven't made those decisions yet. Public schools, the state public defender, which we know was a new office that we created last year to help with public defense. And then there's a few like smaller things, but the big ticket items that are left are really public education, colleges, university. We got the Medicaid and the health budgets through, and a variety of others today. So that's really what's left. And that's probably, I don't sit on that working group. How the committee now is led is that the senators are divided into these working groups and different topics. And I'm not in that topic area. I'm in the Health and Human Services topic. So what you hear is that the education budgets are some of the hardest, mostly because now some of the makeup of the committee is a little bit different than it has been in years past. And folks have some different ideologies about public education and colleges. So we'll see what happens.
Thank you for that update and kind of explaining a little bit more of all that JFAC does and encompasses.
Yeah.
So I know that's always a hard committee to be a part of, and there's just so much there's so much detail that you all have to go through. So I appreciate the update and all the work that continues to be done. We'll see the next couple of weeks what all happens. So kind of jumping into housing, that's obviously been a pretty big topic. And as a business or as a business organization, that's been something that we've been concerned about and just kind of looking in over the last few years of trying to make sure that folks are able to live here and live, enjoy the quality of life that Idaho offers. So can you share any housing proposals or updates that's been talked about or being talked about in this year?
Well, I just so appreciate that question. We know that housing and housing affordability is probably the number one thing on people's mind in our state. We know that through the Boise State Policy survey they do annually. That was the one that rose to the top, but we just know that in our heart. We don't even need a research study to tell us that. And the unfortunate part is, while I've heard my colleagues number of times say this is a priority, we're not seeing it come out in action. The governor had in his keeping promises plan at the beginning of the session a number of initiatives that he put forth that he thought would help the business community in our state at large. One of those was $15 million to go to our workforce housing trust fund. We created a fund about 2 years ago. We put $50 million in there, and that was to incentivize and help with the development of affordable and workforce housing. It got gobbled up in no time. Because of the need. So the Senator Robbie, who many of you know, she works at Jesse Tree in her full-time job. She worked with the governor and his staff, and he put that in his budget as a request, $15 million, which just scratches the surface. Unfortunately, that was one of the first things that got cut in JFAC, which we just talked about. And unfortunately, when I asked, why are we cutting that? That's what the governor recommended. This is the number one priority for people. This would just be a little bit of a boost. Well, the response publicly was, if we're going to do all these income tax rebates and tax cuts, we're going to have to start cutting other things. And I think we all really appreciate tax cuts, absolutely, but not at the expense of really responsible budgeting. And the governor, in his initial plan, he had reserved $100 million in tax reductions, which I think was pretty generous, right? But the legislature has actually gone well above and beyond that. Now we're probably going to look at about $450 million of revenue reduction permanently that will impact things like the services that we need. And so here was one of these initiatives for housing that we should have accepted and put forward, and the legislature killed it, which I think is unfortunate. The other thing in the housing front is Senator Robbie did have 2 bills. She's on maternity leave right now. And her one bill made it and the other one failed. She has one bill that would create an interim committee, which basically will be a group of legislators and that will meet in the interim session, so in between legislative sessions, to study the housing crisis and the issues that we have with affordable housing. And I would imagine that we should be inviting businesses and developers and other folks to the table to say, really, how do we really approach this? So that did pass, so that's some good news. The thing that did fail is she was working really hard with apartment association leaders. She had huge buy-in from the community and businesses to address some predatory application fee processes. It got through the Senate, and then they killed that in the House, unfortunately. But I think that would have done a really good thing for folks, especially we heard stories of people who were applying for like 10 places and bankrupting themselves just in the application fees. So it just put some side rails on that. The other bill that I think, I don't know where it is now, but Todd Achilles had one that looked at the kind of the algorithms for the rent pricing and so forth. I don't think that got anywhere, unfortunately. I'm kind of looking over here at my cheat notes. I think those are the big issues that I've heard so far. But unfortunately, what I'm seeing on the other hand are bills that are actually not positive and are, some attacks on our homeless community. And so that's really unfortunate to me. So I wish I had better news for my city about housing. The one positive thing I would say, Tori, so I don't leave everybody feeling really upset, we did pass some additional property tax relief, and which I'm very glad of. And I share with my colleagues on the chamber floor that's the first thing we should have done. We know that housing is an issue and property tax an issue. We should just address that right out of the gate. Instead of all the income tax. Now they're doing a grocery credit instead of the grocery tax rebate. So again, I think I would have liked to have just seen that property tax go for now, but yeah, here we are.
Well, I appreciate the sandwich effect that you shared, kind of started a positive and then ended a little positive as well. And, yeah, I think that's something that the chamber's noticed a lot is becoming it's definitely a workforce issue. We released after Boise State's public policy survey, which I just absolutely love attending and just seeing all the work that they do for that. We just released something really simply. We just asked our members, is housing and childcare affecting your ability to recruit and retain? And the response was just, I think we got, maybe 100 responses, and most of the time I think they both averaged out. I think a couple people said no to one and the other, but for the most part, it averaged out to both be an issue. And so that's something that the chamber continues to try to partner with, and would love to be at the table on certain conversations just to, try to figure out how to help.
Well, I would mention too, since you got me down that road, there was a bill here to deregulate childcare altogether because some of my colleagues believe that's the issue as far as the shortage of childcare is regulation. But I know in our city, Boise has done a really good job of providing property tax relief and incentives for those daycare, in-home, childcare facilities, as well as, really good quality and safety ratios. After a bit of a fight, they did put the quality safety ratios back in the legislation. But I'm a little bit concerned about our childcare businesses right now. They came to testify against that bill. But they passed it anyway. And I think because, the childcare facilities were appreciative of the, safety and quality standards they had in place and the systems we have in place and those incentives. And now the state's going to take over that whole thing. And I didn't really like that because they were basically infringing on local control. And if the locals and the cities, they have some decisions to make and they can run it a certain way, then the state should not bar them from doing that, especially if they're having positive effects. So, the real issue behind childcare, as we know, is if the legislature, in my opinion, would prioritize, incentives to help grow the economy, which is childcare, right? This is a good, easy investment to make because it would be a boon for the economy. Parents can go to work and feel safer and more, at ease if they know their children are being taken care of by quality, high quality childcare. The economy does better. Everybody wins. And so I wish our government, instead of responding and clamping down on our personal freedoms, would look at how we get upriver to actually build a foundation for a good, thriving economy. And I think childcare is one of those.
Yeah, I definitely think so. We can't have, it's not just a women in workforce issue. It is a family issue that both parents struggle with. And it's hard to feel fully connected to, having a work-life balance and feeling connected to your work without being worried that you're your child's unsafe, or even just having the opportunity to know that they're in a good place and they're
Right.
being taken care of. And as someone that doesn't have kids yet, it adds a layer of stress when we don't have enough care in the community, and just wanting to see that grow a little bit more, and having more options. And so we appreciate all the work that our childcare employees and businesses do, and hopefully we can remove certain barriers without removing certain regulations.
Well, and to make sure that we have those Idaho Child Care Program subsidies coming for our lower income families, because that helps get them good quality child care, and it boosts the economy that we need, and it really helps child care businesses in general. So, we saw the department cut after the legislature expanded eligibility, cut it. And I think that is not the best move, especially if we're going to prevent, kids in foster care and so forth. So anyway, that's enough on childcare. My bad.
Well, no, it's again, another big conversation, and I appreciate the work that you're doing. And we could do one specifically on childcare.
Yes.
It's just such a big conversation. And we'll continue to hopefully be a part of those and see kind of where it goes. So, well, speaking of another big topic, and you mentioned it in JFAC that it got passed, is Medicaid. That's been a pretty big conversation this year. And can you share kind of an update on that and where we're currently at?
Yeah, I just came from the Capitol steps, and there's a big rally here today in support of Medicaid. And most of the speakers out front were folks with disabilities. And people, when they kind of have this myth and misunderstanding about Medicaid, they forget that Medicaid is there for people who are aged, disabled, and children. And it was 1948 that the Idaho Supreme Court said that is our obligation as a state of Idaho, is to care for and put state dollars toward those folks. So when we just kind of meaninglessly talk about, oh, we're going to reduce Medicaid or repeal this or repeal that, we better think twice about what we're doing and who we're affecting. And you could see the people out on the steps today. Now, initially in the session, there was a bill introduced, 138, that would have been a full repeal. It was a trigger to repeal Medicaid entirely. As I talked to my colleague who did that, that was one of those things that, hey, we're going to cut off your arm, but you'll feel better when we just cut off your hand later. And so they actually held 138 in the Senate. And then another bill was introduced, 345. And that is it's basically messing with Medicaid again, enacting work requirements, and not a full trigger, but what I say is a trigger, defunct, because the bill gives the director any means necessary to cut the budget if the federal match decreases. And so as I share with my colleagues, if that happens, now the director you can't kick somebody off an entitlement, which is somebody with a disability, enhanced, aged, et cetera. But you can cut services, and you could kick people off Medicaid expansion. And to me, that is it's kind of an around the way, nothing to see here method to repeal Medicaid, which I think is disingenuous. And I think what's really hard, in my opinion, is the voters voted to expand Medicaid. They said, we want to make sure people who are working class, individuals, low income, can get to health care. Because if they have primary health care, they're not going to use the emergency room, just like all of us who are employed. And Medicaid expansion is for the working poor. And the voters said we want that. And every year since that has passed by the voters, this legislature has done everything it can to mess with it. And every year has tried work requirements. This is the first time it passed. But the problem with work requirements is it's a misnomer. Most of the people on Medicaid expansion are working. They are reporting income. Unfortunately, a quarter of them are diagnosed with serious mental illness or a substance use disorder, right? And so if you want folks to get treatment and then get back to work, then you allow that. I think what work requirements does, it's just kind of a misnomer. It puts all these administrative barriers in the way. And we know how it is when you get a bunch of paperwork to fill out. If you don't get it right, you don't get your signature right box, you don't get it on time, you're risking getting kicked off of the program. And we've seen that in other states where the administrative requirements were so great that people who are eligible got kicked off and then had to go through the whole process again. And I just think, it's not worth the money, especially the voters have spoken, and the legislature needs to just get the message and quit it and stop wasting time, money, and energy on trying to roll back what the voters have asked for. And Medicaid at the time when it passed was 62%, almost 62% of the vote. A survey was done, I think, a year ago by, I think it was Idaho Voices for Children, and showed in the polling 73% of Idahoans now say, don't mess with Medicaid, leave it as is. So it's even more popular to the voters. So we just need to leave that alone. But it did pass. So they're going to do a waiver for work requirements. So we'll see what that happens. But the other big thing that they did is they put a provision that the department had to do some work to get a managed care organization to take over Medicaid. And what that means is basically they're going to hire a private large insurance company type to manage the program, which means our taxpayer dollars are going to have to pay the administrative costs to run the program, right? And the benefits. And I tried to explain, that will increase cost of Medicaid. It just will, because you're going to have to hire a third party to actually administer it. You're going to have additional staff to monitor the contract. And the people here that I'm most worried about are folks with disabilities, because they have a different, there are different rules in place to make sure they get the services they need. And sometimes managed care, if you're not monitoring it really closely, they don't get the services they need. So, that was a lot.
Well, yeah, that's been such a big topic. My next question was, what's the biggest topic that you've seen in the session? And I think that that's probably been one of the biggest ones.
Yeah.
And for the chamber, we've been focused on a couple healthcare stuff as well. And, it's so complex. I think there's so much misunderstanding, and just, there needs to be, for me, even, I'm like, can someone simplify this? Like, can you talk to me like I'm a 5-year-old? Because there's just so many complexities to it. And you have to be careful with how many people will be impacted by it.
Well, and here's the thing, Medicaid doesn't have to be that complicated. It's we, the people, who are making it complicated. And I'll give you an example. The other big topic that we saw talked about was vouchers, right? House Bill 93, the governor got almost 38,000 calls that said, do not allow for these tax credits for private schools. We want you to focus on public education. 38,000. And I think maybe, what was it? Maybe 5,000 said support it. So in the face of like 83 or 80 some percent of the voters said, don't do it, he did it. I think that was highly controversial because the Constitution says, hey, our job is public schools, not private. And we've seen these programs in other states just balloon out of control. And so now we're in a situation where this legislature is cutting revenue by over $453 million. Now we have this new program that we've seen is ballooned out of control in other states. We already see in JFAC, their fiscal note was they got $50 million to put toward these tax credits. And they said they didn't need only but one staff, but now we're up to 7. So we're up to almost $700,000 that they're asking for additionally to administer the program, right? So you see how that kind of goes. So yeah, Medicaid vouchers, biggest issues of the session, again, because it's about how we're using our tax dollars and are we using them wisely. And to circle back, what we see with Medicaid is my colleagues say, hey, you got to monitor that like a hawk. That's why it gets so complicated. We have all these restrictions and limitations, and we got to monitor who's on it because we don't trust that you'll use it right. But what I heard on the Senate floor from my colleagues is that we're going to cut you a check for $5,000 up to $7,000 for that private school with no accountability because we trust you'll spend it right. Now, I'd like to trust everyone, not just certain people. So let's be consistent. Oh, you're not going to have me back on your show, Tori.
No, we want all perspectives. We appreciate it. I think it's healthy to know where you're sitting, and as well as other legislators. I think, that's the chamber. We want to be a bipartisan representative
Right.
businesses. And I think
Absolutely.
at the end of our day, or at the end of the day, our goal is to make sure businesses have autonomy, and then, also that our workforce feels supported. And so
Right.
I think, we could get into the weeds on a lot of issues. And we definitely want to represent our members well. And so,
Yes.
yeah, I think it's really informational to know kind of every perspective. And I
Well,
agree. I think those were really big topics that, I mean, it's been coming for the last couple of years. So it was
Yeah.
interesting to kind of see them come to a head.
Well, and I think they're important to businesses, right? Folks move to the community because they want good schools and good health care. And, our schools, we have some great public school teachers, and we just need to focus more on that. And our medical system, unfortunately, we're like, I think at the bottom of physicians per capita. We've had these bills that are criminalizing physicians, and these bills here in the state house this year to take residency seats away and medical programs. So I really encourage my colleagues, we got to get back to basics. Let's make sure healthcare is funded, schools, we have good affordable housing, because this is childcare, because that's really what supports our businesses. So we need to get back to the basics, I think, and quit worrying about libraries and 10 commandments and bathrooms.
Yes, back to the basics. I agree. I think, yeah, I agree. Well, I think kind of as we close out, I think you kind of touched on it with the vouchers and Medicaid, and, hearing from Idahoans and what they think is the best thing for the state. And also, that civic engagement is so important. And I think, how would you say to get engaged to other businesses or just even community members? What's the best way to get engaged, to understand what's going on, to feel, connected, and kind of humanize all of you that are in the state house right now, because you all have your districts that, you're trying to represent.
Yeah.
And I think, I hope people feel connected to that somehow. And so I just would like to hear your perspective on that.
Well, I love Boise. I love my community, and it is an honor to serve. And in fact, when I first ran for office, I was scared to death because, to be an ambassador for the people of this district is a heavy task, because we have bright, caring, welcoming, wonderful people in the city, and the businesses and the arts community and the beautiful foothills behind us. We got it all, right? And so my goal is to preserve that and make sure that I am listening. So listen, y'all, I welcome, and I think I would hope any legislator would welcome your contact. I get emails and phone calls, and people come meet with me. So a good way to get engaged, I think, is number one, the Boise Chamber and the Chamber Alliance has great updates about what's going on legislatively and policy-wise for the state. And I encourage you to reach out and share what matters most to you and to make sure that we are addressing it. I think that's so important. And when I'm doing, here in the legislature, and we're hearing bills, or I'm doing legislation, I think it's so important to hear from businesses how these things are impacting you, and to hear personal stories. Because you said humanize me, but we have to humanize the issues many times. I find that we're in this sterile environment talking about policy, and we many times forget the human faces, lives, and hearts behind these policies. And I would welcome your involvement. And I think it's essential as business leaders to get out there and share what your values are. If it's education, stand firmly behind our public schools. If it's, personal freedoms, if it's our libraries, whatever. But I know I look to the business community, as any community, as another valuable constituent of putting the puzzle together. So I welcome it. I welcome it.
Great answer. Thank you. We love Boise too. It's such a beautiful city to be a part of, and in general, the state. I'm so grateful to live in Idaho and to be surrounded by so many beautiful opportunities and beautiful people. So, well, we really appreciate your time, Senator. Thank you so much for your service to the state, and for your service to the community, and for joining us today. We really appreciate you.
Tori and everybody out there, my final word is look, as I sit in the seat, I'm seeking balance and common ground. And I think that is really what is going to restore faith in our government, is to avoid the extremes and come to the middle, find the common ground, solve the problems, and figure those things out and leave some of these nonsense topics aside.
Well said.
I
Yes.
said it.
Well, you've always the balance and common ground. I think that perfectly describes you. I've always, I've always seen you. I mean, I watch you in hearings and a part of those conversations, and it always seems
Thank
like you're
you.
so willing to hear every side and really try to understand the background to it and to understand the humans behind it. So, yeah. Well, again, thank you so much for joining us. A huge thank you to our sponsor, Hawley Troxell, as well as our media partners, Idaho Ed News, Idaho Capital Sun, and Idaho Press. Thanks to our viewers, and we'll see you next time.
Thank you. You're amazing.